We have conflicts, contests, wars, pandemics, climate catastrophes, extreme weather events, political mobilizations and civil society mobilizations that have upended arrangements. It's been a very, very complex decade that we are in, and it's not yet over. So what I'm really going to ask the panelists today, and I'm going to first pose the same question to all of them, that if we were to look back, sitting where we are today, what are the lessons we would have learned from the experiences in the past? And what are the new ideas that we can propose as we leave this room and go back to our own jobs? What are some of those ideas that can be implemented to make the world a better place? I think it's as simple as that. This is what we are trying to do, from the political polarizations to issues around climate and multilateralism, to questions around culture and identity. So we are going to literally have a sweep of what we have discussed over the last 2 days. I'm going to be slightly rude as a moderator, and I'm going to interrupt you if you take too much time. I want quick, rapid-fire responses so that we can cover this fairly robust. I'm only not going to interrupt the minister here. He's above my pay grade, but everyone else is fair game. So look, I have a job also to keep. So don't accuse me later on of any biases. I'm being upfront with you. Okay, so let me quickly get this off the ground, and let me ask my dear friend Ana Miguel Santos, former member of the European Parliament. And in fact, now she's back in the European Parliament, so welcome back. I am going to ask you that question, Anna, from a European lens. The elections and what has happened in the last few years in Europe. Is Europe dividing, or is Europe healing? What is the state of the union? I mean, it's an easy question.
Yes, it's very easy. So let me start by saying Baran Bolorin. I don't know. I tried to say this in Armenia. It's hi to everyone. So I think I look at the subject of this conference, and I say the rise of pessimism. I would like to change it for the rise of distrust, the rise of disbelief, because what I'm feeling, and not only in the European Parliament and in Europe, also in my country, Portugal, a small country, even a small country, very friendly. We have the best soccer player in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo, so I always like to say that because he's our major ambassador. So the ties between politicians and citizens are broken. This is our major challenge. We need to reconnect with people, because the bureaucracy of the European Parliament, the bureaucracy of Europe, are putting not only citizens very far away from politicians, but are cutting the trust that we need for the other to vote and to believe in politics again. This is, as I said, this is not only about ideologies. So this is not a question of, the far right or the far left. It's more than that. It's about human beings, about human vision on politics. And we are losing that because we are making so much promises and we are not accomplished. And people are not stupid. And we need to finish to try to end the speech of infantilization of people and citizens. So saying that, I think that we need more respect to diversity, to the fact of each one being unique. And first of all, I would like to leave you this message. We need to listen more than speak. We only have one mouth and 2 ears. Why we speak more than we are listening? And we are not listening each other. That's not good for mutual understanding.
You raise an important point. Let me ask you a second question and then move to the next speaker. Left, right, far left, far right. Politics seems to have been now stratified. And there are, political theorists have divided the electorate into these easy labels. I call them easy labels. It's easy to label anyone with anything today. I mean, you have your amplifiers today, your handphones, your mobile phones. Is the reality more complex? Where does identity, locality, local cultures, local economic context play? How is Europe responding to this?
The world is much more complex than that. it's a question of cultures, diversity of cultures. Look to Europe. We have 27 countries with 27 cultures. In each country, we have so many different cultures, so many different concepts. For example, the concept of family is different, for example, in North Europe, in South Europe, even if we're going to compare to Asia, even to Africa, is different.
Or to Hungary.
Or to Hungary, of course. Everyone has every culture has their own approach, their own vision of things. So when we are imposing one speech and we are not adapting our speech to these different cultures, we are having a disconnection with the needs, with the dreams of the people. So we need more things like that, dialogues like that. Why I'm here? I'm here from Portugal. What Portugal could bring to Armenia? This is a good question. What Portugal could bring to India or even South Africa? Dialogue. I can connect people with my experience. So we need to respect. But for us to respect,
so basically what you're saying is,
first.
what you're basically saying is European values need to be rewritten in a 21st century context.
They need to live together. We need to respect others. We need to listen more the others.
Okay.
Learning and mutual understanding. I cannot come here and impose my views.
Okay.
I can share and try to find common grounds.
Let me turn to Minister Paruyr Hovhannisyan, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Armenia. Sir, same question to you. This region has particularly witnessed a turbulent decade that we are still in the middle of. How do you look back to what you have experienced and probably what could be the lessons for the road ahead?
Thank you. For us, the turbulence and resilience is actually been reality for the last 3 millennia. And we accumulated genetically or we hope we accumulated genetically the response to this question. Yet, it's still not that easy. I think we could look at negative and positive sides and then try to combine those. But it's not only in case of Armenia. Globally, unprecedented progress on some tracks and pervasive challenges from the other side. That's the features which are not only the reality for Armenia, but I think it's a global one. There is probably not any country which could say that's the opposite. Partly it's explained also by such features as weakening of multilateralism, something Armenia, any small country, but also bigger countries, at least many of them are attached. But this is not a new reality. Sometimes we think multilateralism is a static situation. Not at all. We have the similar situations in after Napoleonic Wars, after the First World War, after the Second World War. Probably we are also in the same crisis, and we are in the process of shaping new order, new global order, new regional orders. And from Armenian side, I think we're trying to be as active as possible, to use all the opportunities. Look, this big conference, and I think it's a success. This last panel, so many participants, I'm surprised. But we hosted many other events before, landlocked countries ministerial, EBRD annual meeting, parliamentary events. This year we are chairing Black Economic Cooperation, Forum of Ancient Civilization. India is also part of it.
You have the big IT conference coming.
And we have a big IT conference. It's really a lot. And that shows that we try to be active, innovative, to adapt to challenges, which are numerous, but also trying to use the lessons learned. I think the major phenomena here that we should act not out of fear, but to act out of hope. That's probably was the motto for Armenians. It was always certain hope. And I think this is the driving force not only for Armenians, but for the human beings. We genetically predisposed to have a hope.
And you know, just to take that forward, you have, as peoples, been through really tough millennia. You just mentioned 3 millennia, right? And yet you are today advocating hope. How do you make this more infectious? How do we actually make others look at the world in the same way? What is it that Armenia can tell us so that others can feel hopeful as well? you see people around the world having everything but not having hope. So how do you give hope to those who have lost trust?
I think, indeed, the change of practices, sharing this experience, that's also partially the globalization, and this conference like this, it's already an attempt to that. This panel is already an attempt towards that direction, and I think with more proactive policies, much more wider global actions, that's the only way forward. I think indeed Armenia could share. Armenia wants to be a positive contributor to this region. Armenia wants to close the centuries-old animosity and negative part, and our efforts, be it on establishment of peace, be it in communication, be it in the new technologies. We now have this tumor-centered education for children. Even Angela Merkel was impressed, Mayor Hidalgo. It's now we have in a number of countries. So that's another example of our attempt to bring this positive contribution.
No, I think all of us would agree, and most of you would have been to the city center, you would have been to different restaurants and bars late at night. We can confirm that you are people who know how to celebrate life.
Yeah, it was not depressed for sure.
No, you are happy people who celebrate life, and that itself must be known to more people. So, David, I'm making a case for having the second edition of this conference so that we can bring more people in. So I'm doing a little bit of my own diplomacy here. But let me turn to Ebtesam. Ebtesam, we have heard about listening to each other, sharing with each other, hope. We have heard 3 words till now from our previous 2 speakers. Sitting in the Middle East, you are in a perpetual state of crisis, right? How do you assess this decade? And don't give me the 3 millennia argument, 3 millennia argument, because we know, we've been through a lot. But in the recent times, what is it that you have learned about the world we live in, and what could be done to make it better?
Good afternoon, everybody.
You'll have to bring the mic close to you, Ebtesam. Sorry. No, the mic is on, but you'll have to bring it close. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Look, Samir, you cannot separate Middle East from the world and saying it's just this is Middle East, because we are living in a world of uncertainty, and you cannot give any kind of definition for the world where new world order. No, we don't know. It is unipolar, bipolar, multipolar. You cannot give it this time. The great powers, not in their glories. Okay? Our big ally, United States, it's losing its glory. Okay, competing for that, but trying. I don't look at it as an honest competing. Trying just to distract China from growing. And this is not the way. Okay, find your way. Same in Middle East. You have it the same. Because the uncertainty in the global order and what we call it world in flux, this is also have its impact on our region, where you have the regional power are competing, you have instability, you have wars, you have conflicts there, you have people competing, but at the center of that, I cannot say the whole Middle East, this is a black. You have the Gulf. Now, the center of gravity moved. It used to be with Egypt, it used to be in Iraq, it used to be in Syria, the East region, big power. Now, you are talking about the center of artificial intelligence. I would say my country, UAE, just we announced that we finished just lately, our nuclear civic station with the partnership with the South Korean, and this is something give you hope. It's not that when we look to Israeli-Palestinian, of course it doesn't give you hope. When you look to Yemen, it doesn't give you. When you look to Syria, when you to other part of Arab world, there is no hope. There is no hope because you have this intervention from outside. You have non-state actors, okay? You have, by the way, you have country. If you are talking, they are saying we don't have resources. We have country like Algeria, Libya, even Iran, even Iraq. Look what they ended. It's not about money. It's about visionary leadership. It's not only leadership, visionary leadership. Okay? You know, you have roadmap. You know where you want to go. This is what happened with UAE. This is what happened. Why it's create its model of power based on soft and hard power. MBZ knows what he wants. Good education, good economy, technology.
No, so your point is that leadership is a crucial determinant of the future. What about multilateralism? We spoke about the decay of multilateralism. Sitting in the Middle East, one could argue that you have seen the ebbs and flows of the international rules-based order more than anywhere else. What is your assessment of the multilateral system?
Multilateralism, it's a solution. But the American doesn't want multilateralism. They want unipolar. They don't even bipolar. And this is the dilemma where we are. So don't partnership with India. Don't partnership with China. I am the only partner. You have to deal with me. It doesn't, look, before, yes, we were small. We were depending on United States. We were telling us, go right, we go right. Go that way, we go. But now we grow up, okay? We grow up. We have our own muscles. We refuse. And, okay, this is Russian, our enemy. You have to be, they have to be your enemy. China, our enemy. They have to be your enemy. No, it doesn't work like that. Our national interest is our priority. This is what we learned, okay? We don't care. If you don't like it, it's up to you. It's not us.
You know, this is a remarkable panel in which we have been through 3 speakers and no one has yet questioned the institution Shombi Sharp works in. We have not yet, we have not yet heard a wrong word about the UN yet. He's safe. He's safe. I thought he was going to.
He's not safe. We have to create another UN. Reform the UN, create another new one. Very weak UN.
Okay, Shombi, sorry, I asked for it. So, Gladden, let me come to you before I come back to Shombi for some of the positive spins. You know, I want to alert all of us today that we are also in a decade where we have lifted more people out of poverty, where we have offered governance and services to more people than ever before, where more people today have access to basic services that were considered to be a preserve of the rich and the elite, where telecommunication has shortened the distances between people. It's also exacerbated certain cleavages, but still, I would say that we could develop in less than 1 year a response to the pandemic that we experienced. So there have been some gains we've had. So I also want the panelists to think about the positives that we have learned from the last decade. It's not been that gloomy, right? So Gladden, you can still be negative, but I'm just saying that. I'm not going to stop you from your assessment of the past. What did you learn and what can be done?
Well, you made me start thinking about the.
And by the way, you are literally the most popular man in Europe. Now start.
Thank you, Samir. And so 10 years ago, I was at that time, and still am born and raised in the United States. But 10 years ago definitely feels like a long time ago because I was living and working in the US and I did not have this on my 2024 bingo card running a Hungarian institution and doing conferences with Samir in Yerevan. So I really, I'm buckling my seatbelt for the next decade already. But as I look back on that time, and I was in the political science world at that time, in the US, the outlook was very much that there's only one recipe for success. Mm-hmm. And so I think we can take your observation that there has actually been a lot of good news and a lot of positive results in the last decade. In many respects, the what we can acknowledge is very good, but the how it can be obtained now seems to have a number of different recipes. And at the time, in the one recipe model is like, there's the Washington consensus only, there's the neoliberal model only. It goes along with a certain particular political system that comes along with certain cultural and ideological beliefs. and it all goes together, and not a single part of it can be altered. I think, again, looking at it from an American perspective, that began to change a lot in 2016. For better or worse, the system began to experience some shocks that it had difficulty analyzing. But we have to take that opportunity and have a more, indeed, diverse view of the paths to success in the world. You know, when you take this one recipe model, it's very hard to fit Hungary into it, because we know that Hungary has a more culturally conservative basis, and so a lot of American commentators assume, well, okay, that means it's also a very xenophobic, isolated society. It must have no international trade whatsoever. And in fact, it's one of the most pro-connectivity countries in Europe. So there's a different way to package these different elements. There are a lot of good things that were discovered, that were put into the one recipe box. But we have to break it open and find out what's
Gladden,
right.
you said a lot of Americans would think that you are conservative, xenophobic. But I can confirm to you a lot of Europeans think that also about Hungary. How do you respond to that? I mean, my problem is not America, who's across the pond. You have your neighbors who think that about you. How do you respond to that reality?
For some reason, I still think of America from time to time. But yes, it is. Well, come to Hungary and see how it works. Come and see what it's like to run a business there, to tour there, to travel, to live. It's not what they tell you.
Say about it,
yeah, I mean, when I moved there, I was like, okay, I've stepped behind an iron curtain of disinfo about this country, and in fact, it's a peaceful and prosperous place that's quite tolerant, and certainly it has a strong bias in favor of legal and lawful immigration rather than the open border type. Again, slightly different picture of the recipe, but yeah, it's not what they say.
So Gladden, I want to ask you one more question, now I want you to wear your American hat. The politics of today, the ideological politics of today. We heard the word leadership. Ebtesam mentioned leadership. Can democracies agree to any form of leadership today when the politics is so divided? Will any leader be accepted by all the population or large chunk of the population in a system, in a political system that we see across countries? It's not only America. America is probably a peak division. But how do you think about leadership for tomorrow when the politics of today is so divided?
Well, I think we have to start with more what I would call strategic discussions around the issues that everyone is concerned with. So what is the recipe for good economic success in your country or in Europe over time? This discussion has been lacking because the right-left politicization has kind of squashed it, and everything has become a very short-termist discussion. So I think having more strategic discussions would work. In the old, again, you could call it neoliberal system in the US, there was an alternation of parties, and the thing that stayed was American foreign policy. Mm-hmm. And there are good and bad aspects of that. But it is possible to have and that represented a kind of social consensus. It is possible to have a social consensus around some crucial issues. Of course, the politics has made it more divided, but if we don't break out of there's only one recipe box, then I think we'll never get there.
Shombi, let me turn to you. Your assessment, being in an institution that still represents our best chance for sustaining some form of order internationally, an institution that has in many ways, through its various agencies, delivered development, delivered some sort of succor to a lot of people who required it. Yet an institution that today has lost trust, has also lost credibility. And it has these two shades to it. How do you assess the world in the institution where you sit? And what are the lessons from the past that must be implemented in the future? And I'm particularly asking you this question because your Secretary General is hosting a summit for the future. And I don't want you to leak the draft here, but some ideas that the Secretary General might be thinking about, or the UN must think about in the days ahead.
Thank you, Samir. And I just want to say, for me, it's a particularly emotional moment to be here as being UN resident coordinator in Armenia before, and now in India, and seeing a room full of familiar faces and good friends. So I just wanted to say to the Indian colleagues in the room, Mujhe aap sab se milkar bahut acha laga. And to my Armenian friends, I'd like to say Shat Orachem, Vor Miasanink. It's a wonderful opportunity to see you again. I really couldn't imagine a better place, so thank you for the invite, Samir. I think, in terms of the lessons for the last 10 years, first of all, I mean, maybe I would share 3 or 4. One is whatever we're doing isn't working. We're facing the hottest year, the hottest month practically every month that passes. So it's frightening when you think that our children are going to look back and think, wow, how cool it was in those days. They had to wear coats or something like that. And in Delhi, that's particularly frightening. We have more hunger than we've had in 2 decades. Sustainable development goals are massively off track. Gender equality is hundreds of years away. So whatever we're doing, it's just not working. And what we see is that the challenges we face are, for the most part, not challenges that can be solved by single governments within borders, the cross-border like that. Secondly is change and the pace of change, the Moore's Law sort of a thing. Samir, you started with a quote from Vladimir Lenin, right? I want to quote his brother, John Lennon, who, one of the Lennon brothers, I forget, said that, life is what happens while you're busy making plans. And this is what we've learned, that you make the best plans and then things go awry. You look at 65% of today's primary school children will be engaged in jobs that don't even exist at this moment in time. I don't know about anybody here. I certainly never thought about being a drone operator or a content creator or all of these things. But to prepare the young generation for these kind of 21st century skills, it takes a lot of work and it takes knowledge sharing across countries. And then finally, is the rise, the change in the world is the rise of the global south. Looking at, it's a completely different world from the one in which the United Nations was created, when this international rules-based order was created.
So when that order was created, just for all of us in the room, there were 52 countries versus close to 200 today,
193.
193 today, 52 countries that were in the room when that United Nations was created. Yeah, go ahead.
193 today, right? Now, I would argue the principles have not really changed. But the way that you achieve those principles, the way that you achieve those objectives, the SDGs are still our kind of roadmap, but the way you achieve it, that must change. You look at the Global South, by 2030, 3 of the 4 largest economies will be there. India will be the 3rd largest economy in the world. Renewable energy production, most of that will be coming from the Global South as well. The economic growth, GDP growth, will be massively skewed towards the Global South. So, when we look at the way that we need to work and come together, as I think some of the colleagues here have been saying, that needs to be built into our decision-making at the multilateral. But the point is, it's not should we have multilateralism, because bilateralism, it serves a purpose, but it's not going to solve the challenges we face. We need multilateralism. The question is, what kind of multilateralism do we need, and one in which the Global South has a much stronger voice. That's clear.
Shombi, you would agree that the fundamental purpose of the UN, and let us not distract ourselves with climate change and SDGs at this time. Those are very important pursuits that the entire global community must respond to. But the purpose of the UN was to keep peace. The pillar of peace and security was the fundamental core of the United Nations. And you have failed in that. I'm asking you a question, sorry.
Look, I think I would say yes and no. And of course, I don't speak for the United Nations, but I should put a caveat there. But there's no doubt that the world is beset with conflict. This is true. The UN was established, in the ashes of the Second World War to try to prevent another one happening. We have, thankfully we haven't had a Third World War yet. But I would point to one, there have been a lot of successes. The problem is some of those successes you don't know about because you only really read about conflict when it emerges. Peacekeeping, for example. Peacekeepers across, we have 87,000 women and men in uniform peacekeeping across the world. Armenia is there. India is the largest contributor of peacekeeping troops in history. the first country that provided all women peacekeeping units as well. There's actually, people don't know this, a long list of conflicts which were, in a way, resolved or conflict prevented through UN peacekeeping. I mean, Cambodia, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, I mean, the role in Cyprus and others. So, but clearly, so there's a lot of success, but clearly we are not achieving what we need to achieve, and we need to find the way to do that. And reform, in terms of the power, the real, because the UN is not a monolithic thing. Also, I want to point out that the UN is delivering huge impact and results in the field of, we're taking care of 117 million people who have had to flee their homes from that conflict. We're providing vaccination to 45% of the world's children. So when you look at humanitarian and development and human rights work, there are all kinds of successes. But everybody does think of the Security Council. That's the most divisive area, and that's the part in greatest need of reform. And there's nobody more in favor of reform of the Security Council than the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. But the issue is, that's for the member states. The UN is, actually, I think it was Shashi Tharoor, I heard the former Undersecretary General of the UN, Indian diplomat, who said that the UN is both an actor and a stage. It's a stage for member states to come together. When member states agree, then the UN can act. But until member states agree, it's very difficult for the UN to act when it comes to peace and security.
So basically the divisions of today have rendered the UN and its peace and security pillar rather weak, rather feeble. I think that would be a fair assessment to make, and unless the members find a way of working together, we are going to have to continue to rely on other arrangements outside of the UN.
And the summit of the future, as you mentioned, which is, okay, the world realizes we need to make changes and we need to do it fast to get to 2030, happening just in a matter of days in New York. There is a Pact for the Future draft, a political declaration, which does include, I won't read it, you asked me not to, but does include the language, we will reform the Security Council. So on the one hand, it does remain a challenge. On the other hand, there's never been more momentum for real reform of the Security Council ever before.
Great. Anna, you were looking at me. I think you were looking at me when Gladden was speaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to say this, beside the fact that I'm great respect for my friend Antonio Guterres, he's the Secretary General of United Nations. But I think the United Nations need a profound reform, like other institutions, because the time is passing by very fast and we are not adapting so fast. But the question for me is the lack of accountability. These kind of organizations in democratic systems, when we give money to them, we give money, and they said, oh, this is for support this program, blah, 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 blah. And you don't go after and see, what have you done? And the question is that these kind of institutions were built in a model based on economic. So we need to change, and from this I will pass to my second idea that I really want to leave here. It's the lack of trust, that's the problem of these institutions, because the biggest asset for you to give security to the other is trust. And knowledge. Because knowledge allows you to know the unknown, so give you trust. And how do you achieve the knowledge? Listening, going, dialogue. And then, I will finish. We need empathy for the others, we need respect, and we need to move from an economic diplomacy that we are using in Europe and other countries, of course, like United States and so on, for a cultural diplomacy. This is the main challenge of this century, believe me. Because you cannot divide people. We are all, at the end of the day, we are all human, and we are all seeking for survivance. Once more than others. But we cannot diversify each other from the money we have. We need to be more diversity in our being.
So don't organize people by their economic status, but by their cultural
course,
reality.
See, for example, my country, or even the relationship between Europe now with Africa. And we need to start to complain. This is a warning for the politicians, even and for all the countries. We live in a multipolarized world, and we need to look each other as equal. We need to stop looking only to the past if we want to build the future. We need to be more now and try to
So
forget
a quick question to you.
some traumas.
You heard Gladden speak about Hungary and its difference with Europe.
Yeah.
Sitting, you're the European.
I can give you an amazing example. I'm very advocating in my public exposure, and I can give you this example. I was spending these days with Russian people, with Hungary. I don't care. This is not for me. We need to stop to confuse the politicians that are in each time in power with people. People for me are more than that.
Okay.
I don't allow anyone to characterize me through my prime minister or the government who are there.
Or the policies
Yes.
of your government. Okay. So, Ebtesam, I want to come to you and then I'll come to the minister. I really want you to think about two things. We have heard the question of identity, and nowhere has that issue been more agitated than in the Middle East. There is a growing school of thought in many parts of the world that there is a process that wants to homogenize and fit everyone in a similar mold. We should all have similar tastes, similar preferences, similar choices, similar worldviews. In many of our cultures, in Middle East and in South Asia, even within a country, we don't have similar views. You talk to 1.3 billion Indians or 1.4 billion Indians, and you'll get 1.4 billion views of the world, right? And they change their mind very often. So we get quite a few. So how do you reconcile this question of identity and culture in a region which is already, in many ways, has a legacy of conflict and contestations?
Well, Samir, yes, there is identity for each, I would say, nation. But we are living in a globalized world. Now, if you look to the young generation, they have the same taste in music, in food, fast food. They have that kind of common thinking, dealing with digital things. But at the same time, your national identity is there. I would give also example for UAE. Yes, we are here in the Middle East, where is the conflict of identity based on sect, based on religion, based on race, language. We have many. And we, as UAE, we host 200 nationalities in UAE. Managing 200 nationalities is not an easy job. But you put strict rules that everybody should follow. At the same time, you create environment of stability and security where everybody finding themselves, they are benefiting from that. So they are not going to spoil that. And creating what we call it dialogue. You talk about dialogue of culture. We created dialogue, culture and religion and sects. And we put it under umbrella of tolerance, because this region really, most of the conflicts because of that. No tolerance against gender, against a sect, against religion, against the other who is different than you. So accepting for other. Now, between that, your national identity is not shame to show your national identity, but don't make it as a racist policy like what we have now, far right in Europe. Okay? And I would add what has been added in because, in the beginning of Ukrainian war, I was in a country, I will not mention this country, but I was at that, attending a conference. At that time, those people saying, oh, we are opening our houses for the Ukrainian and we are not even putting any kind of fines on their cars. We're arresting. Last December, I was in that country attending a conference. People, they are not happy with the Ukraine. I'm telling a fact. I'm not, this is nothing to say with the sympathy, because they are saying we are losing the job. We are under economic pressure situation. We need that money for us. The government doesn't care for us. You hear that? That's right. This is where Europe also, I'm saying, has to push for a peaceful solution rather than to put more arms for continuing wars and wars and wars. We are a region plagued with war. Look where we are. Look where we are. Nothing happened. Look to Egypt, look to Syria, look to wherever you will look in the Arab world.
So we should pursue peace, not war. But
Peace
you know,
will benefit Europe more than war.
but Europeans argue that the global south, your country, my country, many other countries, are actually helping Russia to fight this war. What do you respond? How do you respond to that?
No, I don't. No, they are totally wrong. We are not helping Russia, but we did not cut our relation with Russia because we have interest. You have interest. As I said, why your enemy should be my enemy? Okay? Because also, if we use that standard, okay, they should also side with the Palestinian against the Israeli, if we will use this, okay? Or side by anyone against anyone, right or not? It's not why we are using double standards, okay? Side by with the Afghan regarding their government. So it is double standards always used, Samir. No, UAE did not cut its relation with Russia. There is interest, right? But we are also mediated in the hostages, okay, prisoners coming back. We also sympathize with Ukraine. But it doesn't mean that I have to cut, because there is a conflict. You had a war with Pakistan. We didn't cut our relation with you, okay? We have relation with you and Pakistan and India. India is a big partner for UAE. We have also interest in Pakistan. So it's not black and white in international relations. It doesn't work like that. But I'm saying the lesson we should learn, that the more conflicts, the more wars in the world, it doesn't help anybody. Not the South, not the...
Minister, you've been hearing this debate. The failure of the UN to intercede, or rather the weak United Nations security interventions, double standards, the pursuit of conflict rather than the pursuit of peace, sitting in the space that you do. How do you respond, or how do you assess what's happening now?
Indeed, UN case is also its specificity. Imagine we're talking about reforms. I've been working in New York since 1998 to 2001, and that was the topic, the reform of Security Council. That was endless topic, and I remember with my Indian, Italian, and other colleagues, there was lots of engagement with Brazilian and so on. That was the topic, and it was at the end the deja vu. But the problem is, you mentioned correctly, 55. It was already tough at that time. Now it's almost 200. It will start the discussion to achieve consensus these days in any organization becoming almost impossible. Any paper you starting to produce, the discussion going endless. We have new format now in Europe, European political community. That was French initiative to create that. And the positive side of this format, we do not discuss papers, we do not discuss anything. It just talk like this. It actually have academic format, but for heads of states of all European European states, besides Russia, Belarus, and I think Andorra, San Marino, a couple of them. But the benefit is that these days achieve consensus on an issue literally becoming impossible. Complexity of the issues, rightly mentioned, national interest becoming more dominant. That's the combination of different factors. Yet still, I don't know whether it will be possible to reform UN Security Council or UN as a whole, but still most of the organization trying to adapt to the new realities as well. We see the organization which has been dealing with different topics, like Council of Europe now dealing with artificial intelligence, not human rights issue directly, even though it's related to that. We just had the first convention regulating this very specific topic, one of new challenges there. So again, the resources are there. It is just to have the reconciliation mood, and of course, centrality of resilience. It's a term in Armenia these days. Diversification and resilience, two most popular words, but not only for us. Be it war in Ukraine, be it changing of the trade pillars, the tensions in different parts of the world. That's making resilience is a key word, and be it for the member states, be it for different organizations. No one of the international forums as a peak of its effectivity, but opportunities are there. And again, depressions and hopelessness wouldn't help anything. I think we should carry on. We should see always to the opportunities rather than the negative parts and weaknesses. And UN is one example. Perhaps UN Security Council, that it's been long that time, not the most effective body, but look at its specialized agencies doing huge job, like in Armenia, FAO, WHO. The assistance they do is tremendous, and they changing the lives of human beings on the ground. We could go on with different organizations, and again, the major topic is to have this. Reinforce our collective potential to innovate, adapt, and overcome. It exists. This potential is there. We see the example with each day. The challenge is becoming also not less. Nevertheless, that probably was more like the essence of lives of human beings at any period. So it's not such a huge exception. So again, I'm still optimistic.
No, you must be, and I think you gave a very important example of the Council of Europe. And I want to just extend this argument that is it therefore a valid judgment for many countries around the world to make that perhaps solutions will now be found because of the fact that the UN is divided. The solution may be found through smaller groupings to come up with plurilateral arrangements, as they call it, or minilateral arrangements. And do you think, is that going to stay with us? Is the small club of countries that align themselves for specific issues or specific purposes going to be the normal in multilateralism?
I think for sure this process is already on. I just gave example of European political community. That is exactly the case when it's same composition as Council of Europe, by the way. So this new structure, it's an expression of this attempt to have processes dealt on regional level. We have quite a few new additional integration mechanisms in Latin American countries and Caribbeans, in Africa as well. This regional trend and sub-regional trend also getting stronger. And even in your part of the world, we see new regional initiatives, new structures, new organizations. So certainly not to replace the global structures, but to amend this regionalism is also part of sub-globalism, I would say, which could be indeed effectively complement sometimes ineffectiveness on the global level.
You know, before I came to Yerevan, Gladden, I was told by one of our folks in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that in the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, as it is called, that apparently 34 countries have applied for BRICS membership. After the last expansion, another 34. Is Hungary going to join BRICS?
Well,
I'm just, since you have a connectivity project and you're connecting to the other side, do you think it is useful now to break the silos and think about these other groupings in different parts of the world as a means of engaging with a whole new set of actors? It's a serious question.
I think what plagues the discussion about BRICS and similar, large minilateral organizations, I want to echo some of the comments of the Deputy Minister here as well, is something like EU envy. Everyone seems to ask questions like, Will BRICS become something like the EU? Will the EU become something
Hopefully
like
not. We might be more
the
productive.
EU's? Yeah. No. But I mean, I think a lot of the multinational, multilateral institutions that were built in the shadow of the post-war kind of ideological fervor identified nationalism and the nation state as somehow a danger or a risk. And based on the experiences of the first part of the 20th century, that's certainly a reasonable conclusion to a certain extent. But it became kind of overweighted with a very heavy ideological overlay that everything contributing to nationalism has to be wiped out and can be replaced with the little neoliberal one solution bag that we mentioned earlier. And I think that these minilateral organizations, up to and including BRICS, are somehow ways of breaking out of that, because they provide you a lot of different ways of looking at national interest in different configurations. So if we expect the world to form more multilateral institutions or multinational institutions in the same way that it did previously, we're probably looking for the wrong thing. And in the meantime, organizations like the EU are suffering a bit from the way that they have operated. They have become more ideologically overweighted. They've viewed national interest as an obstacle rather than an essential part of obtaining consensus. They've tended to use an ideological framework for prohibiting discussions of strategic calculations, because you get put in an ideological camp as soon as you start to ask questions. And I think all of those things are making those institutions more brittle, and so we will see successful experiments in alternative regional or even global arrangements of different types. But I think the key feature of those, to say something specific and not to be too vague about it, is they have to be platforms in which different aspects of national interests are discussed and exchanged.
Shombi, minilateralism, clublateralism, and multilateralism. How does someone who works in a multilateral institution view this? Complementary, or is it a contesting development?
Well, I think, I think there's one can't ignore that there's some contestation there, certainly, if bandwidth is limited. But I think largely it's complementary. I'm just now trying to think of an analogy. I can't think of one, but imagine a table, I think the minilaterals is a sort of like legs, but you still need that broad table to bring everything together. So minilaterals will serve important purposes very well for certain groupings, but you still need an all-inclusive place where...
To respond to the planetary challenges that we confront.
Where the small island developing states can have an equal voice, an existential voice, this sort of thing. But it's very fascinating to see what's been happening really in the last year, in fact. And that's kind of, I think, the message that we take to the P5, the ones who stand to kind of, in a way, lose the most power in terms of Security Council reform, but I think actually can gain the most as well, which is if the Security Council doesn't reform and eventually it breaks, then it can be replaced by these other multilateral platforms. Before, that was just sort of a theory. Now we see just in the last year, G20, under India's leadership, which delivered a huge number of very important consensus results at a time nobody thought that would be possible. India invited in the African Union as an important move for inclusion through the G20 mechanism. The BRICS, as you've just mentioned, now growing and growing and growing. Of course, it's a little bit like right-sizing the invite list for your dinner party. There are diminishing returns, and you start to find out the bigger you get, the harder it is to come to consensus. So I think it's a very important interplay, and I think fundamentally it's complementary.
So we are going to now turn it over to you. We are going to take 3 questions or 2 questions and come back to the panelists for their final responses to each of those. So I can see a hand here. And is there any hand on that side? Can I see some? I can see Marcin there, and I have the good general here. So we'll start with the general first and then come to you, Marcin. Okay?
So the discussion began with a reference to dying hope and aspiration. Now what surprises me that the United States today is facing this crisis of dying hope and aspiration, a $22 trillion economy, I'm told the deaths out of despair in the United States are larger than those of COVID. Declining life expectancy. And I'm quoting Neil Ferguson in a famous article. So if this is the state of a $22 economy,
$22 trillion
$20
economy.
trillion economy, I think a $4 trillion economy like India, where hope and aspiration is still alive, is a far better prospect. So anybody in the panel would like to respond to that?
Okay, so hope and despair and economic well-being are not related is the question, or are they? That's the question that he's asking. Marcin.
Well, thank you very much, Samir. Excellent conversation. Great to see so many friends at the panel. Two questions, actually. I'll comment on a question. First one about the UN and Security Council reform and generally the Summit for the Future. Does anybody remember what globalization was, or actually even using the term or word globalization? I mean, we don't see it anywhere else. It was sort of, given a kiss of death in many ways, but it might be actually not so bad to go back and look at the connectivity aspects that were put there on the table, because some solutions actually could be still valid. And this is a lot about what the minister was mentioning. I mean, there have been discussions before. It's not like we're really inventing something completely new. It is about the political will and leadership. And my question is to colleagues around the Middle East. And actually, we've worked with a couple of colleagues for a long time on an idea of sort of an OEC for the Middle East. By the way, an organization that provided a lot of security for Europe, which Russia trashed basically and became obsolete. But could that kind of an initiative be built in? Would you see that as a potential kind of way to open up then the base for more collaboration, connectivity, to build economic relations that could form sort of a closer of a EU type of an institutional arrangement for the Middle East, or well, for Latin America, as was mentioned here as well? Thanks.
So there are two questions here, three questions rather. And I think that the final part of Marcin's question, I'm going to just add some words to it. Is it fundamentally rational to assume that good economic connectivity leads to peace? I'm going to just put it out there. And is that a recipe that we must pursue, or is that a recipe that has failed? From our experiences in the past, Europe was never more interconnected when it went into the big wars in the previous century. So what is it, economics alone, connectivity, or is it connectivity of cultures and diversity and people that we really need to focus on? So let's respond to those questions: hope, despair, and economic status, as well as visiting globalization, connectivity, and of course these mini-lateral arrangements that connect as well as ensure peace, like OSCE, right? So let's start with Anna and let's end with the Minister. Minister, you'll have the final word. Let's start with Anna and go around the panel.
Beside the fact that I'm not from Middle East and the questions are...
No, you can take it broadly.
Yeah, I have just three final notes. I would like to highlighting when Madam was speaking very well about the interests and relationships. We are adults, so of course all the countries have interests, also Europe. Sometimes the speech, and I'm very bossy with Europe and my country, I'm very autocritic, but I need to recognize that Europe also have interests, so they will support one part of the conflict as you will support another. So just to make this idea, multiculturality doesn't mean that you need to eliminate someone. This is the major challenge. Multiculturality means integration and inclusion. We need to find ways of living together and in a very respectful way. So we need, regarding Europe and other countries, we need to stop, and I'm focused more on politics, we need to stop this show of politics. We want to show our power through things. For example, European Parliament has two parliaments working, Strasbourg and Brussels. Why? Because France doesn't want to eliminate this, its parliament in Strasbourg. For what? Why we are spending money there? And this is the kind of issue and the situation that helps to put citizens more far away than politics, because we are not practicing what we are preaching. So leadership, what you said before, of course, by example. We need to be what we are speaking, what we are talking. So this is my big message for you all. Thanks for these dialogues. They are very important, and we need to speak more, be more humble. And when we go to another country and speak with other country, we need to be more humble, try to forget some traumas of the past, like we do in our families and in our couples and with our husbands and wives and so on. We need to talk more about the future and has a message of hope. I'm a very positive one, so I believe in human being.
Okay. Gladden, $22 trillion economy and yet despair.
Well, in 2016, there was a famous map that was produced called the China Shock Map. And this was an area, a map showing the parts of the US that had undergone the worst deindustrialization in different areas. So these areas lost their pharmaceutical factories or textile factories or whatnot. And there was a certain version of globalization which had gone into and fed the decisions which led to that. And that was the idea that, in fact, nations don't matter, are simply obstacles to a certain form of globalization, that it doesn't matter where anything is made, that we can completely dissociate all the parts of our lives, the economic life, the social, cultural, national, consumer, separate them all. There's nothing that brings them together. And this is not the same experience of globalization that occurred everywhere, but it is a certain form that happened in the US. And I think it underlies the phenomenon that has been mentioned, because those were the areas which, since 2016, and in many places it hasn't improved, there has been a lot of despair. Communities haven't come back together. They haven't magically, the jobs didn't magically come back. Some of them have navigated well. Some of them have navigated poorly. It's a big country. This doesn't mean that globalization itself is wrong. It certainly doesn't mean that connectivity is wrong. In fact, in the last few years, we've been going in the other direction, particularly in Europe. Europe is a place that has benefited from a different model of globalization. It's a place that has to have a very open economy. It's where things come in and are made and are sent back out. It doesn't have the same geo-economic situation as the US. So we have to maintain the concept of connectivity, but put it together with other concepts, again, like national sovereignty, national interests, that sometimes were thrown to the side in that early phase, that kind of hubristic phase of globalization, if you will. So we have to be more careful about how we put those things together. But I think from a European perspective, certainly a Hungarian one, it seemed like globalization was the name of the game, and then suddenly everything's going in the other direction. We need to have a more mature way of combining connectivity and national interest.
And does more connectivity lead to peace?
Yes, if we include in that diplomacy and negotiation as the basis for good exchange. So I think it was, I think the problem was that in some places globalization was presented as an ideology to be imposed rather than a framework for articulating our interests and learning to cooperate directly. It was in many places inflicted, and you had many publicists in the 1990s saying, well, it's rationally better to have all of the factories in this middle Midwestern town shut down because it'll be optimal for them later. In the meantime, like an entire real community got destroyed. So it's about the right framework for decisions. And connectivity is clearly the name of the game in more and more regions, but putting it together with the concepts that will make it sustainable and a good framework for evaluating how economic relationships can support peace, that I think is essential.
Ebtesam?
Well, two issues. I think multilateralism now, it's working. Medium powers are more effective. India is one of them. And this multilateralism, it's more effective rather than those in United Nations. This is what we are witnessing now. Yeah, more consensus between those medium power. Regarding connectivity, yes, I agree. Economic connectivity, and it does work. And UAE put economy first in its new version of foreign policy. But Gaza war, and that was where a Naqab Forum created after the Abrahamic Accord, that there will be many economic projects between Jordan, Israel, part of the Arab world, even Europe. IMAC was one of that. But Gaza war shows that geopolitics influence geoeconomics. Okay? IMAC has been stopped. All that project from Naqab Forum stopped. So if you don't have stability, if you still have wars and conflict, so this economic connectivity cannot work. It doesn't work. You can apply it anywhere. If you have conflict, connectivity between Europe also, Ukrainian war, stopped it. Europe all now, it is only focusing, producing arms, and more on militarily side rather than economic side. And this is what we need to learn from what's happening, that win-win situation or win-win formula, this is the best formula for everybody, okay? That you cannot take everything, and you have to accept to take a share. Zero-sum game, it will lead us to chaos in this world.
Shombi.
So I think I would say, to quote Sir David Frost, who said, diplomacy is the art of letting others have your way. You know, that maybe worked in a unipolar, maybe a bipolar world, but in this multipolar world, it doesn't work anymore. That's very clear. And so I think that's the major change. And again, we talk about the rise, the locus of power of the global south. You could just look at, for example, one issue, which is adaptation in the face of climate change. I mean, you look at India, which is facing, some of the greatest hazards of climate change. But at the same time has historical emissions of like 5% or something, but with 18% of the population. So the imbalance there is dramatic. The high-income world, sort of pledged $100 billion a year, struggled to make that. By the time they make that, now we realize we need like 3-4 trillion, something like that a year. So we need a quantum leap in terms of the accountability of those who became wealthy on the back of dirty energy. This is, the multilateral development bank reform that we're talking about, the Secretary General has called for, rescuing the SDGs and these sorts of things. And again, India's G20 presidency put that very much at the top. So that's one. And India has put forward the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So to bring that resilient infrastructure to the global south, to developing countries who are facing the impacts of climate. That's one. But I would then, just on the optimism sort of thing, I would end on a feeling of optimism. I am optimistic. And two streams of optimism there are Armenia and India. And as we say, someone said, together that's 1.4 billion people.
I wonder who said that.
Yeah. And, but truly, you see, my time here in Armenia, I witnessed incredible combination of the talent of young people and digital technology, innovation, AI, deep tech, blockchain, all this really, really cool stuff that is taking advantage of Armenia's strengths to provide value to the world. And I hope everybody who's coming and visiting has a chance to go see Tumo, to go see all of the really, really cool things that are happening here. India, which has, I like to say, the greatest, meaning the largest youth generation in history. No country has ever had more young minds to tap for solutions, ever in history. And it's happening, and it's happening really, really quickly. So India's Jam Trinity, digital public infrastructure, we've had some great discussions yesterday and today on that, is showing what you can do when you provide 1.4 billion, digital identities, mobile phones, cheap data, digital bank accounts, inclusion for women. All of these things are really, really powerful. So I think that it looks very pessimistic now. But when we see the pace of change, I do believe that we are going to get to where we need to be. And I'd like to say, Shnurl Kalutsun to my Armenian colleagues, and Bohat Danyavad to my Indian colleagues for all of that.
Okay. Mr. Minister, the final word.
Indeed, first on connectivity and peace, we're strong believers, and our Armenia's project on Crossroad of Peace that been mentioned, I think, a lot during the conference, one testimony that we really believe in that approach, and we see the correlation between economic benefits and peace. That's how also the European Union was founded, after all. I also would agree with the comments on the Reform on Security Council, when sometimes prolonged discussion lacking the results. I think demands for political courage is even more high now than ever before. Ability to take right decision is not sufficient just to discuss and talk, but to act. That's probably the biggest challenge these days, and to have this political courage in most difficult situation and challenges, something hopefully would save us at the end. So once again, this discussion, which could be quite depressing, turned to be a quite
Positive
realistic
one,
and
right?
positive.
No,
Exactly.
actually,
You managed.
Mr. Minister, I think it is all you're doing. You introduced the word hope, and you infected the panel with hope. I think what I take away from this panel are three things. One was the interesting words we heard. I think David started that yesterday morning. We must listen more. We must hear the other. And I think you started this yesterday, your speech, and we heard that resonating through the panel, that let's listen to each other. I think that was an interesting proposition. We heard about leadership, and I think that's important. We saw that through the panel, the importance of having a direction that is inclusive and takes everyone together, understands the contextual differences, and yet finds a way that includes all. I think that's leadership, right? That we heard about that. And the third, I think, Marcin, your point, very important point. Everyone on this panel is betting on connectivity, is betting on globalization. I think the caution here is that at some point we used to argue that economics is hitting a political wall because we got the politics wrong. I would argue today that politics is hitting an economic wall because we've got our economics wrong. And I think that's the point Gladden made, that if you have perverse economics imposed as an ideological framework on geographies around the world, you will eventually fund bad politics. And some of the bad politics that we see today comes from 75 years of some elements of globalization having gone wrong. Globalization has to be invested into. We have to sustain it. We have to bet on it. And as an Indian, I say it, because this decade belongs to countries like ours who are rising, including Poland, Marcin, who are rising, who are growing, and who are eventually going to meet the expectations that their people have from their governments and from the world that they live in. Armenia is a case in point. Armenia is on the move. And like Shombi clearly outlined, Armenia offers an example of bold, courageous leadership, of betting on connectivity, and believing on the innovation of the young people to transform their nation. And I think this is a good note to end this conference on. Thank you for coming to Yerevan. Armenia is part of the solution for the world we seek tomorrow. Thank you very much, and let me sign off. Thank you. I would request the panelists to please join us in the hall with the audience, and I'm going to invite two of our friends to join us to close this conference. So please, thank you very much, and I would request you to take your seats in the room. And let me move here to begin the concluding session of this conference. Let me invite both David and Minister Safrayan to join us on stage. So we've had a very rich 2 days of discussions, debates, and I request you all to stay with me for 30 more minutes. I want 30 more minutes of your life. Anna, please join me, and others too. You've given me 2.5 days, give me 30 minutes more, okay? Thank you. Maybe 25 minutes. Okay, so as we conclude this, it is only fair that the final voices on this podium for the Yerevan dialogue belong to the two people who have shaped this discussion, this forum, this platform and this gathering. So let me first invite the Honorable Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs to speak to us, someone who has been very keenly involved in putting this all together. So Mr. Minister, can I turn to you first?
Thank you. Is it? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
sir. Yeah.
Well, as we have our final item, the pleasant item ahead of us, I don't want to speak for too long because it might kickstart actually another round of discussions, I'm sure. But frankly, I don't remember so much talent, expertise, and wit gathered in my home country. And I'm very happy that in these 3 days we have exceeded all my optimistic expectations, be it the panels, the discussions, the sessions, the informal socializing, and even there at the Armenian wine. I would like to share with you some of my personal views of the discussions. Many speakers have acknowledged that a lack of dialogue creates misunderstanding, and we are witnessing this phenomenon at a time when our world seems to be wired up in so many ways, including cutting-edge technology that transfers bits of information globally in a matter of seconds. As it was noted by many across the different panels, the climate change is affecting countries and individuals in many ways. And I was actually struck to realize that we here in Armenia do not pay enough attention to this, because our climate has changed and we haven't realized that. This year, heavy rains have disrupted our, well, I will first note the positive aspects. They have made Armenia's sun-dry mountains look like northern Scotland and elevated the level of our precious Sevan Lake. But then they cut our connection to Georgia for 2 weeks. It was damaged, our railway, and also tested our urban drainage system. And I think that one of the aspects of this conference that made me think that we should act already here in Armenia was the discussion on climate change. The second thing, I was shocked to learn that these autonomous weapons, actually, I had to learn the term. Autonomous weapons are, a new phenomenon that is actually, when I was following the discussion, it seemed like it is a sci-fi movie, but then I realized that this is not a distant future. It is already here. We have to deal with it, and really appreciated the call for a convention. Samir, this has been a great exercise, and not least, and maybe most importantly, because we were instructed by our Prime Minister during his inaugural speech to have another Yerevan dialogue next year already. So we might start working tomorrow morning. But another thing that I would like to mention, that I didn't follow these really interesting discussions because I was I followed several panels, but not all of them. But I want to propose to have a publication on this Yerevan dialogue that we held, and also my Minister Mizoyan, when he was making his speech in inaugural session, he mentioned that actually he quoted one of Armenia's famous Armenian-American famous novelist, William Saroyan, saying that something is wrong somewhere.
Good.
So I really think that what is happening here, it is a process of diagnosis of problems that are there in the world, and it seems like we feel this process of putting a diagnosis should happen more often. So I really think that Armenia wants to be a part of that process, and through Yerevan dialogue. Thank you.
Please join me in applauding the Minister for his efforts. And now, of course, we turn to the energy behind all of this, the force of nature, who can produce wine in the vineyard and can create the magic that he will this evening, and yet be absolutely focused on the future, not only for his country but for the region and for the world, and how can he and his ministry and his team contribute to that better tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you David, who has organized all of this and is the curator of the show. David, over to you.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you, all the participants, all the panelists, all the speakers, because you helped us shape the first inaugural Yerevan dialogue. I want to applaud to all of you, because without you, this would never happen. And we are very grateful that you didn't refuse our invitation and came to Yerevan during this beautiful time. That September is the best weather in Yerevan, when you can have the best food, the best entertainment, and the best hospitality. Thank you very much. I want to thank every person who helped to organize this event. The MFA specific team and the team of ORF that were working day and night in order to have the best narratives, the best program, the best agenda we had during these 2 days. I want to thank the technical staff. I think they are not sleeping already for 3 days. Yeah, but guys, thank you very much. I want to thank our volunteers that helped us with all the logistics and other stuff. I want to thank our sponsors that believed in this project. I want to name them: T-Mobile, Ineco Bank, Fastbank, Fastex, and Armenia Wine, where we had a very good evening. A very, very special and warm thank to my brother Samir, who, without whom all of this would never happen, who helped us in every single part. He was very patient with us.
He means rude.
Yeah. Samir, you are in our hearts, and we hope that you take a part of Armenia with you, and it will be always with you. I want to thank my government. I want to thank my Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister that believed in this project, and most importantly funded it. And we already have a promise to organize next Yerevan Dialogue next year, so I will be very happy to host you here next year too. Please, I have a request. Just take something from Yerevan with you and keep it close to your heart. We are very warm people. We are very hospitable people. Come back and enjoy Armenia and Yerevan with us. It's time to party.
So, let me... To conclude this session, let me invite Ambassador Malhotra, who has assiduously produced a book on the South Caucasus. And I want to give it to both you gentlemen for your library in the MOFA. He's been very passionate about the region, and I thought this could be a good souvenir to leave from India with all of you. And now as David said, it's time to party. 7:30 p.m. at the stage. That's the venue for dinner? And then David will lead the way after that. So at 7:30 p.m. meet us at the stage, and then the stage is set for the party. Okay? So thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and safe travels back. Thank you.